Think your life is hard? You wouldn't last 24 hours in medieval times. It wasn't dragons or duels that made survival brutal, but the slow, grinding realities. Hunger that gnaws to the bone, streets that reek of human waste, doctors who bled patients until they weakened, and laws that could end a life for stealing a loaf. Imagine eating bread that can poison you, drinking weak ale because the water will kill you, sleeping in a single room with strangers, and facing a court where pain decides guilt. We'll walk through those everyday horrors, what people ate and drank, how they relieved themselves, how they were treated when sick, and how war and law could erase a family overnight. So by sunset on that first day you'll understand why the past is not romantic and why every modern comfort is a fragile miracle. The sky darkens with the smoke of burning fields as a column of soldiers moves like a storm across the countryside. Siege warfare was the slow machinery of attrition. Armies ringed towns, cut roads and wells, and waited while food stores shrank to crumbs. Granaries emptied in weeks. Inside the walls, people counted days by the weight of their stomachs. Children fell silent, ribs showing beneath thin tunics. Sieges were logistics as much as violence. Attackers raised camps, dug trenches, and hauled timber for engines. Defenders scraped the last sack of grain into the keep and rationed it to the young and able-bodied. When supplies died, the choices were grim: surrender, starve, or a desperate sortie. Recorded sieges tell of people eating rats, dogs, even boiled leather, because hunger is a law that does not negotiate. Armies didn't just fight, they fed themselves by stripping villages of grain, slaughtering livestock, and burning barns. Civilians suffered twice, first by pillage, then by famine. A farmer who coaxed a crop from the soil for a year could watch it vanish in a single night, with nothing left for winter. Disease was the unseen killer that followed war. Men packed into tents shared food, water, lice, and latrines. Wounds festered. Fevers and dysentery spread like wildfire. More soldiers died of illness than swords, and the suffering did not stop at the camp border. Trade collapsed. Prices soared. Families fell into charity lines at monastery gates or took the road, walking for days to new villages already strained by refugees. Hunger frayed the social fabric. Custom, trust, and mutual aid stretched until they snapped. Yet siegecraft was also engineering and endurance. Trebuchets thudded stones into walls. Saps undermined towers. Defenders countermined by torchlight and braced gates with beams. The constant drumbeat of engines, the sight of corpses, and the dread that relief might never come wore minds thin. When walls fell, victors punished. Looting, forced labor, and in the merciful cases, communities left ruined, fields fallow, artisans fled or dead, and a smaller, poorer town rebuilding from ash. The hearth smoke curls under a thatched roof while a single pot simmers on a crooked spit, center of daily life and source of daily danger. Most people ate pottage, a watery, monotonous stew of grains and whatever vegetables were on hand, boiled for days until flavor and nutrition fled. Bread was the real staple, but it was dense, dark, gritty with stone dust from milling. Worse, rye bread could harbor ergot, a fungus that turns grain into slow poison, burning sensations, convulsions, gangrene, and hallucinations that could sweep through a village and be mistaken for witchcraft. Meat was a rare celebration. Without refrigeration, fresh cuts spoiled fast. Families relied on salted, smoked, or dried provisions, tough, briny, barely palatable. Coastal communities might eat fish caught that day. Inland villages swallowed fish preserved for weeks, its smell and texture a constant reminder of scarcity. Water was a gamble. Wells and rivers were contaminated by runoff, latrines, tanneries, and carcasses. The safer alternative was ale, a weak daily brew consumed by children and adults alike because boiling and fermentation killed many pathogens. It wasn't about intoxication, it was survival. Preservation was currency. Salted herring, smoked bacon, pickled vegetables kept families alive through lean months, but salt was costly and methods imperfect. Spoilage and foodborne illness were constant threats. Markets and monasteries offered sporadic relief. When harvests failed or armies swept through, people foraged for roots, trapped vermin, and ate what hunger demanded. Feasts did exist, but for elites. Roasted birds, imported spices, and showy abundance contrasted with functional, repetitive meals of the majority. Spices masked age and spoilage. Kitchens were hazards. Open flames, soot, and smoke invited respiratory problems. Pots reused for days harbored parasites and weevils. Eating was a daily negotiation with risk, nutritional, microbial, and economic, and every meal could be the first step toward decline. Cities stank. Streets and rivers collected human waste, animal remains, and industrial byproducts from butchers and tanners. Most households used chamber pots emptied into the street. Castles reduced waste to a hole in a stone seat, the garderobe, that dropped excrement down the outer wall. Some towns had privies built over rivers, but they were rare. Open gutters ran through streets, and the same waterways served drinking, washing, and disposal. The night brought gong farmers, workers tasked with excavating cesspits and hauling waste beyond the city walls. They were paid better than many laborers, yet ostracized for the smell and the stigma of the work. Without germ theory, people blamed bad air, sin, or season for disease, while contamination spread dysentery, typhoid, and fevers one bucket at a time. Medieval medicine rested on the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile, health as balance, disease as imbalance. The cure for many ailments was bloodletting, lancets and leeches drawing excess blood until patients weakened or infections took root. Apothecaries dispensed mercury and arsenic. Dosages were guesswork, and the cure could be deadlier than the disease. Surgery was crude. Amputations, cautery, and wound care happened without antiseptics or anesthesia. Child mortality was high, life expectancy short. Epidemics could erase half a city in a season. Tooth decay was torment. No proper brushes, little understanding, and extractions by force. Hygiene rules recommended wiping palms on dirty clothes, a ritual closer to spreading than cleaning. In a world without microbes, fear and faith filled the gaps. Most people were peasant farmers. Dawn to dusk in the fields with wooden tools drawn by oxen. Harvest days stretched long under a baking sun. Wages were minimal, often just enough for bread, and many were paid in kind. Trades offered alternatives but demanded apprenticeships that could begin at 7 and last more than a decade. Blacksmiths breathed smoke and risked burns. Tanners worked in urine and harsh chemicals, wearing the smell through town. Justice was arbitrary and public. Laws varied by town. Punishments were severe and often theatrical. Trial by ordeal, hot iron carried 9 feet, wounds judged by healing. Trial by water, sink and be innocent, float and be guilty. Executions were spectacles. Crowds gathered for hanging, beheading, and the worst punishments reserved for treason. Torture extracted confessions. Innocence was a luxury of rank. Nobles purchased leniency with combat or fines, while commoners met the law's blunt edge. Medieval towns reeked of human waste, rotting food, unwashed bodies, butcher's blood, tanning chemicals, and smoke from countless fires. People carried pouches of herbs under their noses to mask the smell. Bathing was infrequent. Many believed it opened pores to sickness. Lice were common enough to warrant dedicated combs. Clothing was rough linen under heavy wool, both rarely washed and worn to rags. Shoes were thin leather, flat-soled, and harsh on the road. Language itself was a barrier. Middle English sounded foreign to modern ears. Common phrases would be gibberish across centuries. Privacy was rare. Single-room homes held eating, work, and sleep for entire families. Travelers shared beds with strangers in inns. Servants watched even moments meant to be private. Entertainment offered violence and brief distraction. Public executions, animal baiting, and wandering performers who came and went. The feudal hierarchy fixed lives in place. Most were peasants working land they did not own. Superstition filled gaps left by limited knowledge. Witches, demons, and astrological omens explained what science had not yet named. News crawled, word by foot or horse, days between villages, months between countries. By now, you can feel the weight of one medieval day. Hunger rationed by handfuls, streets steeped in waste, remedies that drained more life than they saved, laws that punished need, and nights without privacy in rooms crowded with bodies. The past looks romantic in paintings, but its reality was a daily experiment in survival. We endure today because generations adapted. Sanitation, medicine, law, and labor transformed struggle into possibility. Every modern comfort is a fragile miracle. Hold it with gratitude, and learn from the world that built it the hard way.